tertiary or even secondary structure they will fall into. If there is a hiatus that every institution has to overcome to last a little longer, this is surely even truer of a swarm of selfish genes competing for their inheritance. This is why I like so much this expression of a DNA blueprint. It does exactly the opposite job for which it's intended. It destroys for good any notion of a superorganism, not only in the easy case of a sui generis society, but also in the very case of biological organisms themselves, for which there is no question known with us that they generate themselves. A body, that is a physical body, is never a superorganism for its constituents either. A result I can't resist pointing out that Gabriel Tarn also had anticipated. All organisms are in the same boat. To subsist, none of them may rely on an already existing substance, program, structure, or blueprint. As the chairman and I have written in our script, it is now time to stop, and for you all to check whether I've given a description of the organizing mode or not. I warned the organizer, as well as you beforehand, that I was in no way a specialist of organization theory. And if I have probably covered much ground you already know very well, this is simply because I've been a dean for only a few months. I'm just at the bottom of my learning curve. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have 6 minutes. You are under the minutes of this watch. So 6 minutes for questions.
Merci beaucoup, professeur Latour. J'aimerais vous demander, d'après ce que vous venez d'expliquer à propos du flip-flop ou de la séquence entre le fait de pouvoir écrire le script ou de se soumettre au script, est-ce que la position de quelqu'un au sein d'une organisation qui fait que cette personne-là a plus ou moins de pouvoir, disons, sur la direction que l'organisation peut prendre. Donc, même si cette personne-là est jusqu'à un certain point soumise à son script, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas aussi une plus grande responsabilité pour elle de veiller à ce que, disons, le script soit le plus efficace possible, c'est-à-dire d'être le plus souvent possible au-dessus de la situation plutôt que de suivre simplement ce que prescrit l'organisation?
Yes, that's actually the same question which was raised to Barbara this morning, which is the question of the nesting hierarchy. How, with a flat argument, do you reconstruct the hierarchy? And it's a very important question because, of course, being au sein de and in an organization is of course, part of the difficulty. But I'm very interested in, I mean, this is not part of the talk, but the organizational mode is also the one that distributes property. L'expression française est peut-être meilleure, c'est à toi. Now it's your turn, I think you would say. It's your turn. Now it's not your turn. So a lot of the argument about hierarchy can be understood now as being in the box, with, I mean, as probably you mean that, to be inside without any possibility of moving the script and being above. And there are lots of studies, of course, with not necessarily organization, but work, labor, sociology of labor, which shows that even if you are inside the final end of a box, you still have to have an idea of a whole, so to speak. So there is this very lots of study on cognitive abilities to see, to be, I skip that part of the lecture, to be above the script simultaneously when you are under it. My example was when you are under the GPS. You are instructed by the GPS, but you sort of you are floatingly have attention to where the GPS is leading you in the city, right? And most studies of sociology of labor show that even if you are in a menial job, you still, of course, have to do a lot of adjustments. I mean, this is a cliché. So power is, of course, not the word I would use, but it would be very interesting to use this expression of under, to see the degree, so to speak, of being under and above. But the general point I wanted to make is that whatever the concept you use, you have to be simultaneous, I mean, not simultaneously, sequentially in those two modes. And then you would have all this expression, c'est pas mon boulot, I mean, to all of this classical question of sociology of labor. So the question is, how do we interpret hierarchy in these terms? I know it's slightly difficult.
You say that organization is defined in part by what has not lasted, and that there is a continual cycle of crisis and recrisis. To what extent would you say that organizations enact the materiality of what they are? That is, how is what lasts actually the statue as much as what people ascribe to it?
Well, I'm known to have worked on materiality, but I've actually not mentioned the word here because precisely I've done it already. I was not interested here in the delegation to things that last longer. I mean, I've done a lot of work on that. Precisely, I'm interested in the fact that even when this argument is used, the touchstone to judge if it's a good concept for analyzing organization is, can you detect the flip-flopping mode? So I realize it's actually in the title of, of this conference, materiality. Even if you use materiality or loose coupling or garbage can or whatever, you have to be able to retrieve from it this flip-flopping. That was my argument. So even materiality, on which many of us here work, the notion of inscription, scripts, narrative, all these words are excellent, provided they obey to this touchstone. If not, that is, if you have to choose or if you have to do simultaneously under and above, they miss the point. So that's only the little technical point I wanted to make. So materiality is, of course, very important because it lasts longer. Emilio Bootme's bronze bust is still there, and so is this thing here. But on that, I've done a lot of work on the long-lasting. That's why we delegate to things, of course. But that was not exactly the point I was making tonight. But it's a very important point, of course.
You have time for one question.
What I want to say is that there is no inertia, even if you include materiality. If you factor materiality in, it doesn't last. It doesn't give inertia at all. I mean, it's just rust there. So it means there is something else which has to be taken into account, which is this double positioning.
Professor Latour, the Montreal scholars often criticize your work in terms of having a certain reticence to deal with issues of language and communication. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
I'm criticized for what? No, I mean, there are lots of reasons to be criticized, but
A certain reticence to deal with issues of language and communication. Do you think that's a fair criticism? How do you respond to that?
Again, the criticism that I ignore communication?
No, yeah, that you are not taking communication.
Right, I don't take communication at all, seriously. Yes.
Okay.
No, that's probably a bad answer because I remember now we are in the communication department. I mean, I rephrase it in many other terms, in inscriptions, networks, etc. And I don't use communication as a word. That's true, yes. I'm sorry.